Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back. So I wanted to talk about Rick Grimes' brother, Jeffrey Grimes, and it's because I've been seeing a lot of talk about Jeffrey Grimes specifically because of where they are filming in Spain. And obviously this is going to be a big topic. Like, I know we would talk about this like a couple of years ago, and it would just sort of be here and there, like very random, like, oh, could they ever introduce Rick Grimes' brother? But as soon as they confirmed that Daryl was going to France, it was like, oh, whoa, like you're really close to Spain. Are you actually going to be able to introduce Rick's brother? And so now for season 3, they are actually going to Spain. And so I really want to talk about the article that was actually posted. Gimple actually did make a statement regarding season 3 and whatnot. I also want to talk about something that was said during, I believe it was a comicbook.com interview by the showrunner, David Zabel, about season 3 that I find really, really interesting. And I'm really fascinated in season 3 in terms of the direction of them going to Spain, because apparently Spain and how they've handled the zombie apocalypse apparently is very surprising. And I'm really interested in just that story in general there. And yeah, I want to talk about why people think a lot of this is connected to Jeffrey Grimes and all of that. So before we go any further, make sure to be a subscriber if you do want to get more Walking Dead content like this. Now, just like I was saying, this is always going to be a question. Like, until the show is done with the whole Spain storyline or just with all of that in general, this is always going to be a question. I think as soon as they get to Spain, or not even really then, like as soon as they get to Spain, and I guess maybe after they eventually leave Spain or maybe even go back to America, I think that's when the whole Jeffrey Grimes story will sort of be over if they don't introduce him at all. I think that's where a lot of this is going to end here. But what I find really, really interesting is this quote here by Scott Gimple regarding season 3 of The Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon. And I've seen a lot of people saying like, oh, we shouldn't even be talking about season 3. The reason why they confirmed that they're going to be filming season 3 right now before season 2 even came out is because of just the timing of everything. Like, Comic-Con just happened, and also they're about to film for season 3 of Daryl Dixon like right away. And not even really that, I feel like they would have kept it a lot more of a secret, but Norman Reedus has also been talking about season 3 quite a bit, and like filming in Spain and whatnot, right? He even talked about like a season 4. So like, I feel like for Spain, that's going to be the main setting for season 3 and 4. And so I think that's why there's been a lot of talk about this in general. It's just because obviously they're about to film there right away, and Comic-Con is a really big event. It makes sense to confirm a lot of that then. Like instead of announcing that season 3 officially is renewed, say in November or something when season 2 wraps up, like to me it makes no sense, because at that point they'll probably be almost done filming season 3. So it's like everyone's gonna be like, well, yeah, obviously, like we've been seeing a lot of talk about season 3 in general, so it's just obvious. Like, to me it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of talk about season 3 right now because of the location and some other storylines, but that's gonna be pretty quiet as we go into season 2 here, airing next month, right? We'll be focused on season 2 a lot, and then obviously in November we'll focus more on season 3 and where the story's gonna go there. So I want to get into what Scott Gimple said here about season 3, and this comes from Den of Geek. So I'll leave a link down below to this article. France made Daryl and Carol's story into an epic poem with what we found there. What's to come in Spain may even surpass it, and we're so happy to bring the audience more of the terrific 2 alongside new compelling characters in a yet unseen, beautiful, horrific corner of their broken world. And so I know in terms of where they're going to be filming in Spain, I think during the, I don't know if it was the comicbook.com interview or what interview it was, because they did a lot of interviews during Comic-Con, but they were talking about filming in like Barcelona, and I know Madrid was a place they were filming in. Like, there's a lot of places that they're going to be filming in here. And so to me, I mean, if you know the Jeffrey Grimes story, obviously it's set in Barcelona, Spain. You don't really have to stick to that. You know, in terms of the overall story of Jeffrey Grimes, I mean, him being in Spain, that's one aspect that you could focus on. But everything else in terms of his death and all of that, yeah, obviously change all that up. Because at this point, if he is still alive at all, I mean, you are changing that up, because he dies pretty early on in the apocalypse in the comics. And I always have to point this out just cause, but Rick Grimes never mentioned his brother at all in the comic. Like, it was literally not a mention at all. Laurie mentions him once, and Rick's not even around. And so it's literally like a really, really small like piece of dialogue in, you know, one of the earlier issues that was never really brought up again. And so obviously once they did the story here, The Walking Dead, The Alien, at this point, I don't even think it was written by Robert Kirkman, but obviously I think he approved all of it and sort of what the story ideas are here. But that story you can do, like, you can actually tell that story, right? Like, you would have to change up a lot of it. And I would say, I think story-wise, definitely change up a lot of it, because I wasn't that big of a fan of the story. I kind of liked, I guess, the idea that he did have a brother out there in Spain, but it was just the way it ended and sort of the story overall, you know, it was a very sort of sad story overall. And it didn't really add that much to The Walking Dead. And I always wanted them to just sort of, I don't know, maybe like add a little bit more there, or maybe he actually survived or something like that. And so I think for season 3, if you were to introduce Jeffrey Grimes, it would add so much here. And so what we've actually learned about season 3 in terms of them going to Spain and like why, I've heard David Zabel talking about this quite a bit, and it's the fact that Daryl and Carol are trying to go back home, but they end up in Spain. So it seems like whatever happens here in season 2, whether they want to stay at the nest or whatever, it seems like eventually but Isabel and Laurent are going to want to actually probably leave with Daryl and Carol. So I imagine those 4 characters at least. There might be other characters, but I could see those 4 characters for sure. Daryl, Carol, Isabel, and Laurent being characters that will actually show up in season 3. And there might be other characters. I mean, it would be kind of cool because that would mean going into season 3 that we have sort of a new group forming here, right? Kind of similar to, the early days of The Walking Dead where, in season 1 and 2, you had this group forming. A lot of people just found each other. Then eventually you just had like this main group, right? Like the original Walking Dead group. And so that's what's happening here. And I think in season 3, what they're talking about a lot is Spain is in a very different place than what France is in, or it's more of a surprising state, I guess, that they're in, and we're supposed to feel very surprised by that, like, oh wow. And so I wonder what that means. Like, why would that be surprising? Does that mean that Spain is a very safe place? Are there walkers there at all? Like, I'm really wondering what the differences are between Spain and France. We know that there is a lot more in terms of like leaders of certain places, and so I just wonder if pouvoir in France has enemies out there. And so maybe Spain is that, or like, I don't know. Like, that's the thing. I don't know where they're going to be going here, but the way that they're talking about season 3 is that season 3 is going to be even more insane than what we got in seasons 1 and 2 in France. And so the question that I have is, in order to really do that and to really make that season better than seasons 1 and 2, and again, we haven't even watched season 2, but we can tell that, it's going to be a really great season, you would have to, somehow do better than the whole Super Walker storyline. Now, obviously, they could still be a thing in season 3. That could definitely be, something that we see in season 3. Maybe they become the more dominant strain of Walker in Spain, right? But I just think that, yeah, you would have to obviously do better than that. And then I think you would have to do some character stuff to actually make it way more interesting. And that could be introducing Jeffrey Grimes, because I'm just thinking about the whole state of The Walking Dead in general. Obviously, we're going to see Rick and Michonne at some point in the future, but we don't know when. That might be 3 or 4 years from now. I'm guessing it's going to be in like 4 years from now, but I know some people think it's like 2 or 3 years away. I don't know. For me, I think it's going to be some time. I think they're working on the story right now, and I just think that, if there's going to be an announcement at all, it's probably going to be in 2025, like at Comic-Con. I don't think we'll get anything this year or like early next year. It's probably going to be at Comic-Con, and if anything, it's not going to be like, oh, we're about to film or anything. It's just going to be, yes, we are working on something, and there should be like an announcement soon or something like that. Like, that's sort of what I'm expecting, and then maybe they announce it for like a couple of years down the road. Actually, if anything, they probably wouldn't really give a release date. And so I think in the meantime, one of the things that you could focus on, and that would add a lot more depth to the whole reunion of Rick and Daryl, is Rick and Jeffrey Grimes, right? Like Daryl actually bringing Jeffrey Grimes back home to America, right? I think that would be something that would be really interesting here. And I think the way Jeffrey Grimes could work is if they change a lot of how Spain operates, I guess, in the apocalypse. Again, the showrunner said that Spain is in a, surprising place than France is in. And I don't really know what that means. It's like, is everything completely safe? I don't know if they'll do that story again, because we kind of just did that with the Commonwealth, but maybe they do that. I don't know. Maybe it's completely in ruins, although they're not going to do that because obviously, like, you need to meet characters there. There needs to be a bigger story there. So I'm not entirely sure what they mean by that, but I could see Jeffrey Grimes being introduced here and having this story be just so crazy because you have him there. Daryl's going to have so many questions for Jeffrey, and obviously Jeffrey will have a lot of questions for Daryl as well. A storyline that they could focus on here for season 3 could be, what if no one's able to leave Spain? I know that's kind of similar to the whole CRM story, but what if it is very similar to that in terms of Jeffrey Grimes has been there for years? Now, I know that this is very similar to Rick being in the CRM for years. Like, I do get that. But I just think, if Spain just operates differently, if you change the rules of how all that works, maybe it's just, that's how Spain, stays safe. And maybe it's a very safe place in general. And so when Daryl and Carol show up, and the stranger meets them, he first of all finds out that, they're from America and that they just got here and they're trying to go back home. And then maybe that's how they learn that, his name is Jeffrey Grimes. And then there's a connection made there, right? Like whatever the reveal is, I think it's going to be, it's going to feel really unreal. I think at first it's going to be like, is this happening? Is this actually happening? And I don't think it's that impossible. It's not impossible to do this reveal. It's just really got to be done right. It really has to be done right, because if you have a line in there where it's like, my name is Jeffrey Grimes or whatever, like people might laugh, and I don't want that to be the reaction. It would have to be a reveal of maybe he doesn't reveal his name, but Daryl learns of a person out there named Grimes. And so he thinks it's Rick, but eventually finds out that it's actually Jeffrey Grimes, his brother. I think that's the better way to do it, because this way it's not like this big reveal of Daryl being like, wait, what? Who are you? Kind of thing. Because he thinks it's Rick the entire time, and he's wondering, oh, did Rick actually come here to Spain? Maybe that's why he hasn't been able to make it back yet. And then eventually, just throughout season 3, he finds out that it's Jeffrey Grimes, his brother, and maybe that's a story they focus on, for the later half of season 3 or like going into season 4 sort of thing, right? This is going to be a question until the showrunner or any of the cast or anybody says like, no, Jeffrey Grimes is not going to be a thing, because again, he's a character in the comic. Everything is very similar from the comic to the show. Like Rick never mentions his brother in the comic. Rick never mentioned he had a brother at all in the show, right? Like everything's very similar. And what's even crazier is that Daryl is actually going to Spain now. So that's what I mean. Like this is going to be a thing. Everyone's going to be talking about this for a while. Whenever Spain comes up, if there's anything that sort of teases that, or if there's any sort of build up to that, everyone's going to be like, oh, is that Rick's brother? So I'm just very curious on, the next time they do any sort of interviews, like I want someone to ask, like, is the show going to introduce Rick Grimes' brother Jeffrey because you're going to Spain? Maybe that's not a question to be asked right now because they're focused on season 2, but the second season 2 is over, that's going to be a question that the showrunner, Gimple, everyone's going to be asked, right? Like, is Jeffrey Grimes going to be a character that we see in season 3? And they're going to have to actually, get into that. And I really wonder how they would answer a lot of that, because the one thing that I've learned from The Walking Dead over the years anyways is that, they don't really try to mess with the audience too much in terms of like, the whole Glenn dumpster scene, because I remember when that happened a long time ago, that was a whole thing that people really got so frustrated with. And I think the reason why it kind of upset a lot of fans was because afterwards it just always seemed like they were trying to make us watch for like whatever reason, right? Always trying to like make things a mystery, and then it just really never went anywhere, right? And I know all shows, like that's a part of all shows, like you want to sort of do that with every show, but I think they did it way too much back then, during season 6. And I remember just the way it was handled overall, it just really upset a lot of fans, because it was just, you were just trying to get people to watch basically. And I think, obviously at that time, The Walking Dead was like literally at its peak, but it really did upset a lot of fans. And I think it was just a lot, like it was just way too much. And I think now I've seen them like, talk about ideas like that before anyways, like they'll be asked about like, are we going to see this character, or is this thing going to happen? And then they'll sort of address it right away, right? Like I think that was the whole thing. Like the only thing I could say that, was more of a recent thing was, with the whole like The Ones Who Live season 2, they wouldn't say outright at all whether or not, they were going to be doing a season 2. And even though the finale of The Ones Who Live seems like it's really the end, afterwards they're still all very open and like talking about, yeah, maybe a season 2 or a new series or something, or like, I would love to do this and that. So to me, I think that they weren't trying to get us to keep watching for whatever. I think when I look back at that, I'm like, no, that made a lot of sense, because they're still wanting to do all of that. They just didn't want to spoil the ending. So like that made sense to me. So in terms of, whenever they're asked about this, whenever they're asked about Jeffrey Grimes, it's going to be really interesting to see how they respond. If they just say, nope, we're not going to get into that storyline, I don't know. I just don't see them saying that, because I think if they're going to Spain, they all know, like for The Walking Dead, there's only one story where they actually go to Spain. Like in the comic anyways, it's literally the Jeffrey Grimes story. And so if you're having Daryl go to Spain, like, that is something that they probably talked about. It's just how far did those talks go? And, are they actually doing that storyline here? So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see, but post all your thoughts down below. Hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.